Hands on the hood. The command ripped through the quiet afternoon as a gun hovered inches from Marcus Reed's back, steady and impatient. Rough hands slammed him forward, grinding his chest into the hood. Metal bit through his coat like obedience had to be forced into his bones. Stop resisting. The voice snapped, twisting his arm higher and ratcheting the cuffs tighter. Even though Marcus didn't move, he kept his eyes forward, breath counted, shoulders still. They didn't know the man they were pinning down was one call away from ending everything they stood for. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Marcus Reed stepped onto his front porch, the sun warming his face. The folder he carried contained grant paperwork for the youth mentoring program, documents that needed signatures. His brown overcoat sat perfectly pressed over his white dress shirt and blue tie, a professional appearance he'd maintained through his dedicated community work. The quiet suburban street stretched before him, lined with neat lawns and American flags hanging from front porches. Kids' bicycles lay scattered on driveways, testament to the neighborhood's peaceful routine. Marcus inhaled deeply, appreciating the crisp autumn air as he started down his walkway. A patrol car crept into view, moving slowly behind him as he walked. Marcus kept his pace steady, though his shoulders tensed slightly. He'd learned long ago to stay calm when police appeared, no matter how routine the encounter might seem. The engine suddenly roared to life. Tires crunched against asphalt as the patrol car surged forward, the sound shattering the morning quiet. Marcus's heart jumped, but he forced himself to keep walking, one measured step after another. Car doors flew open with metallic screams. "Stop right there," a voice commanded. Marcus froze mid-stride, his fingers tightening around the folder's edge. Two officers emerged, Derek Harlan and Vance Whitaker, moving with practiced aggression. Their boots scraped against pavement as they spread out, weapons appearing in their hands with frightening speed. Both guns aimed straight at Marcus's chest, unwavering. From her front window, Barbara Sutton stood watching. Her face bore an almost eager expression as she peered through lace curtains, hands clasped at her chest. Marcus caught her gaze for just a moment before focusing back on the immediate threat. "Hands where we can see them," Harlan shouted, his voice sharp enough to slice through steel. Marcus slowly raised his palms, still holding the folder, his heart hammering against his ribs, but his voice remained steady. "Officers, what's going on?" "I'm just heading to an appointment. Shut up and drop the folder," Whitaker barked, edging closer with his weapon trained. Behind her curtain, Barbara Sutton's lips curved into a thin smile. Marcus carefully lowered the folder to the ground, movements deliberate and slow. The grant papers inside represented months of work, but right now they meant nothing compared to staying alive. "I'm complying." "Officers, please tell me what this is about." "Turn around." "No. Stop. Get on your knees." Harlan rapid-fired commands, each one contradicting the last. Hands on your head, face down. "Don't move." Marcus's mind raced to process the conflicting orders while keeping his body still. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. His experience navigating situations like this had taught him to move with exaggerated care, to speak softly, to make himself as unthreatening as possible. "I'm following your instructions," he said calmly, though his throat felt dry as sand. "Please, just tell me what's happening." Officer Whitaker circled behind him, boots crunching on fallen leaves. Marcus fought the instinct to turn his head, keeping his gaze forward and his hands visible. His legs trembled slightly from holding the awkward position. "Someone reported a suspicious person." Harlan sneered, gun still aimed center mass. "You match the description." Marcus's stomach clenched. He knew exactly who had made that call and why, but arguing would only escalate things. "I live here, officers. I'm just walking to an appointment. My ID is in my coat pocket if you'd like to see it." "Did I tell you to speak?" Harlan's voice rose sharply. "Keep your mouth shut." Whitaker moved closer, his presence a looming threat behind Marcus's back. Without warning, the officer grabbed Marcus's right arm, twisting it roughly behind him. The sudden movement threw Marcus off balance. He stumbled, trying to keep his footing while maintaining his calm demeanor. "Officer, please, I'm not resisting." "Stop resisting!" Harlan roared, his voice echoing down the quiet street. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Barbara Sutton pressed closer to her window, drinking in the scene with undisguised satisfaction. Other curtains began to twitch along the street as neighbors peeked out, drawn by Harlan's shout. The peaceful morning had shattered into something ugly and familiar. From her front porch across the street, Eleanor Hargrove emerged silently, phone already raised. Her arthritis-gnarled fingers were steady as she pressed record, capturing every moment of what was unfolding. Her doorbell camera blinked its silent red light, collecting evidence that would soon become vital. Marcus remained still despite the pain shooting through his twisted arm, despite the gun still pointed at his chest, despite the knowledge that this moment could end his life if he made the slightest wrong move. His tie fluttered slightly in the morning breeze, the tie he'd chosen so carefully to look professional, respectable, safe. None of that mattered now. The grant papers scattered across the sidewalk, caught by the wind. His years of careful living, of following the rules, of keeping his head down, all of it blown away just as easily as those papers. But Marcus kept his voice level, his movements minimal, his dignity intact. Even as Whitaker's grip tightened painfully on his arm, even as Harlan's finger tensed on the trigger, he refused to give them the reaction they wanted. From his painful position, Marcus watched Officer Harlan's boots scrape against the pavement as the officer circled him like a predator. The sun caught the barrel of Harlan's gun, still trained steadily on Marcus's chest. Every breath felt dangerous, every slight movement a potential trigger. I said, "Stop resisting." Harlan's voice carried down the street deliberately loud, performing for an audience that grew with each shout. His free hand shot out, grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting it upward at an unnatural angle. Pain exploded through Marcus's arm and shoulder. His knees buckled involuntarily as white-hot agony raced through his joints. Still, he fought to keep his voice steady, dignified. "Officer, please, I'm complying. I'm not resisting anything." "He's fighting," Harlan announced to the neighborhood, twisting harder. "He's resisting arrest. Whitaker, help me control him." Officer Whitaker moved with practiced efficiency, his movements suggesting he'd done this dance many times before. His hands locked onto Marcus's shoulders from behind, fingers digging into pressure points that sent fresh waves of pain through Marcus's body. "Stop moving," Whitaker commanded, though Marcus hadn't shifted an inch. "I'm not," Marcus started to say, but Harlan cut him off. "Shut your mouth." In one violent motion, Harlan shoved Marcus forward while Whitaker pushed from behind. Marcus's chest slammed against the patrol car's hood, the impact driving the air from his lungs. The metal felt burning hot against his cheek. More sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Up and down the street, curtains twitched as neighbors peeked out at the spectacle. Some filmed with phones. Others quickly drew their blinds, choosing not to witness what was happening in their peaceful suburb. Barbara Sutton emerged from her house, phone clutched dramatically to her chest. She took small theatrical steps down her front walk, her face arranged in an expression of exaggerated fear, but her eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she watched Marcus being forced to the ground. "Officers!" she called out, voice trembling with false concern. "I'm so glad you responded quickly. I was terrified when I saw him walking around our neighborhood." Marcus felt the concrete scrape his knees as Whitaker kicked his legs apart. The officer's knee pressed into his back, grinding him into the pavement. His perfectly pressed brown overcoat, chosen so carefully to project respectability, was now stained with dirt and engine grease. "This is completely unnecessary," Marcus managed to say, fighting to keep his voice level despite the knee crushing his spine. "I live here. I'm just trying to—" "Still running your mouth." Harlan grabbed Marcus's arms, yanking them behind his back with excessive force. The handcuffs clicked shut several notches too tight, metal biting into Marcus's wrists. "Maybe a ride downtown will teach you some respect." The folder Marcus had been carrying lay forgotten on the ground, its contents scattered across the sidewalk. Grant proposals and budget sheets fluttered in the breeze, some sliding into puddles, others catching in nearby bushes. Months of work reduced to litter while neighbors watched from behind their windows. More patrol cars arrived, lights flashing, creating a carnival atmosphere. Each new siren drew more attention, more witnesses to Marcus's humiliation. He could feel the weight of their stares as he lay face down on the pavement. Barbara Sutton had edged closer, phone raised now to record the scene. "Officers," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I just want to thank you for protecting our neighborhood. When I saw him walking around, I knew something wasn't right. You can never be too careful these days." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, understanding washing over him like ice water. This wasn't about law enforcement. This wasn't about safety. This was about putting him in his place, about making a spectacle of his dignity. Every shout, every rough handle, every tight clink of the cuffs, it was all choreographed to send a message to him and everyone watching. Harlan and Whitaker hauled Marcus to his feet, gripping his arms with unnecessary force. His tie, the blue one he'd chosen, thinking it looked professional, hung askew, brushing against the patrol car's dirty fender. The officers made no move to help him regain his balance as they marched him toward the back seat. "Watch your head," Harlan said with mock politeness, then shoved Marcus down hard enough that his forehead bounced off the doorframe. Pain exploded behind his eyes as they forced him into the back seat. The patrol car's interior smelled of stale sweat and despair. Through the window, Marcus watched his quiet suburban street transform into a circus of flashing lights and gawking faces. Barbara Sutton stood in the center of it all, one hand pressed to her heart while the other held her phone steady, capturing every moment of his degradation. The door slammed shut with a heavy finality. In the rear-view mirror, Harlan's eyes met Marcus's, the officer's lips curling into a smirk of satisfaction, the same expression Marcus had seen countless times before. The look of a man who knew the system would protect him. No matter what he did, as the patrol car pulled away, Marcus watched his street shrink behind the scratched plexiglass divider. His wrists throbbed where the cuffs bit into them. His shoulder ached from being twisted. But worse than the physical pain was the knowledge that this display of force had achieved exactly what they'd wanted: to humiliate him publicly, to remind him and everyone watching that his dignity could be stripped away in an instant. From behind the scratched plexiglass window at booking, Officer Harlan's pen scratched across paperwork with deliberate strokes. Subject exhibited aggressive resistance, he muttered as he wrote, each word falling like a hammer. Refused verbal commands, physically combative. Officer Whitaker stood at his shoulder, adding his own embellishments, demonstrated hostile behavior throughout the encounter. Required significant force to subdue. Marcus watched them construct their narrative, his wrists still raw from the too tight handcuffs. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the intake area's grimy white walls. Other officers moved around them, casting sideways glances at Marcus before quickly looking away. "I need to speak with the supervisor," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady despite the anger and fear churning in his stomach. "This report is false. I never resisted." "Shut up," Harlan snapped without looking up. "You'll get your chance to talk to someone when we're good and ready." "You mean when you finished writing your fiction?" The words slipped out before Marcus could stop them. Born of hours of humiliation and mounting frustration. Harlan's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "You want to add threatening an officer to that list? Keep running your mouth." A desk sergeant wandered over, coffee cup in hand. "Problems?" "Nah," Whitaker said smoothly. "Just another tough guy who doesn't know when to be quiet." They led Marcus down a narrow hallway to a small holding room with a metal table bolted to the floor. The chair scraped against concrete as Harlan pulled it out. "Sit," he ordered. "Maybe some time in here will help you remember how this really went down. Admit you got aggressive, and maybe we can work something out." Marcus lowered himself into the chair, spine straight, face composed, despite the tremor of rage he felt. "I won't admit to something that didn't happen." "Have it your way," Whitaker said with a shrug. "Hope you don't have anywhere important to be." The door closed with a heavy click, leaving Marcus alone with the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of voices. His thoughts drifted to the scattered papers on the sidewalk. Grant proposals that had taken months to prepare, now probably ruined. His carefully planned day destroyed because someone decided his presence in his own neighborhood was threatening. Time stretched in that small room. The door opened suddenly and a young officer stuck his head in. "Reed, you've got a visitor." Marcus was led back to the front desk area. Eleanor Hargrove stood there, her silver hair neat as always, her spine straight as a ruler. Despite her age, she radiated an energy that made the officers behind the desk shift uncomfortably. "I've brought some items that need to be entered into evidence," Eleanor announced, her librarian's voice cutting through the station noise. She placed a thick folder on the counter. A complete timeline of today's events, including footage from my doorbell camera, which captured the entire incident from multiple angles. The desk sergeant started to speak, but Eleanor continued as if he hadn't moved. "I've also included detailed notes of what I witnessed, particularly the officer's escalation of force against an obviously compliant citizen." She adjusted her glasses. "I've already backed up multiple copies of the video footage, of course, standard archival practice." The atmosphere in this room shifted subtly. The desk sergeant picked up the folder with more care than he'd shown anything else that day. "We'll look into this," he said slowly. "Yes, you will," Eleanor agreed pleasantly. Her eyes met Marcus's. "Are you all right?" Marcus nodded, touched by her presence and preparation. "Trust a librarian to document everything." "He gets his phone call now," Eleanor informed the sergeant. It wasn't a question. Minutes later, Marcus stood at a wall-mounted phone, his fingers hovering over the keypad. The card was old, carried more out of habit than hope. A White House liaison's contact information given to him after a community service recognition event. Warren Hayes had seemed genuinely impressed by Marcus's volunteer work, had told him to call if he ever needed anything. Marcus had never imagined needing it like this. The station had grown quieter. He could feel eyes on him, Harlan and Whitaker hovering near the desk, Eleanor's steady presence by the door, the curious glances of other officers. His hands wanted to shake. He wouldn't let them. Carefully, deliberately, he dialed the number. Each digit felt like a step into unknown territory. The phone rang as Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. This could be his only chance to get ahead of the false narrative being built against him. The line clicked. "This is Warren Hayes' office," a crisp voice answered. Marcus took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and prepared to make the most important call of his life. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Papers rustled at the desk where Harlan and Whitaker had stopped pretending to work, openly watching him now. Eleanor stood like a sentinel by the door. Her presence, a reminder that someone had seen the truth, had documented it, had refused to look away. The receiver felt heavy in Marcus's hand as he prepared to speak, knowing these next words could determine whether justice would be buried under paperwork or forced into the light. From the phone's receiver, Marcus heard rustling papers and typing. He kept his voice low but clear. "Mr. Hayes, this is Marcus Reed. We met at the Community Leadership Recognition event. I need to report a civil rights violation." "Mr. Reed." "Yes, I remember your work with the youth mentorship program." Warren's casual tone shifted to something more measured. "Please proceed with just the facts." Marcus gripped the phone tighter, conscious of the eyes on him. "Today, I was walking to an appointment in my neighborhood. Two officers, Derek Harlan and Vance Whitaker, approached me with weapons drawn. I complied with all commands, but they claimed I was resisting. They arrested me at gunpoint. There's video evidence, but I'm concerned it might disappear." The typing on the other end stopped. "Are you currently in custody?" "Yes." "At the central station, they're still processing the paperwork." "Are you injured?" "No serious injuries. Some bruising from the handcuffs." "One moment." The line went quiet except for rapid clicking. "Mr. Reed, I'm connecting you to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division intake line. They'll record your statement. After that, I strongly advise you to obtain counsel immediately and document everything. Names, badge numbers, witnesses. Can you do that? Yes, Marcus said, his chest tight with relief that someone was listening. My neighbor already has video footage backed up. Good. Hold for transfer. A new voice came on the line. Crisp, professional, female. This is Special Agent Lena Vargas. I'm recording this call. Please state your name and location. Marcus repeated his account, adding every detail he could remember. Behind him, he heard footsteps quickening, voices dropping to whispers. A sergeant hurried past, phone pressed to his ear. Thank you, mister. Read, Agent Vargas said when he finished. We're initiating preliminary inquiries. Do not discuss this call with the officers. If they ask, simply say you contacted your attorney. The call ended, but its effects rippled through the station immediately. The desk area had become a hive of nervous energy, officers clustered in corners, speaking in low tones. Phones rang at multiple desks. Marcus caught fragments of conversations as he was led back to the holding bench. Chief Voss needs to be notified. Federal inquiry already. Body cam footage secured. Could be serious. Officer Harlan strode past. His earlier swagger replaced by rigid posture and tight lips. He wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. Officer Whitaker was nowhere to be seen. In the lobby, Eleanor Hargrove sat ramrod straight in a plastic chair, her phone in her hands. Her fingers moved steadily across the screen, methodically creating digital breadcrumbs that couldn't be erased. She'd positioned herself with a clear view of both exits and the booking desk, recording every movement like the keeper of records she'd been. The station's atmosphere had transformed. The casual indifference was gone, replaced by an undercurrent of tension. Officers who had ignored Marcus earlier now cast wary glances his way. A young desk clerk whispered into her phone, Chief Voss is being briefed now. More senior officers appeared, their brass gleaming under fluorescent lights. They huddled near the watch commander's office, gesturing at papers and phones. Marcus recognized the shift in power. He was no longer just another arrest to be processed and forgotten. He'd become a problem they hadn't anticipated. The minutes ticked by. Eleanor's presence anchored him as she continued her quiet documentation. She'd occasionally catch his eye and give a slight nod, reassuring him that every detail was being preserved. Her phone would buzz and she'd tap out another message, building redundancy into their truth. The station door opened. A woman in a crisp blazer entered, her badge hanging from a chain around her neck. The chatter in the station died immediately. She moved with the confidence of someone used to asking uncomfortable questions and expecting honest answers. Lieutenant Carla Reyes, Internal Affairs, she announced to the watch commander. Her voice carried across the now quiet room. Where are Officers Harlan and Whitaker? Break room, someone muttered. Get them. Reyes's tone left no room for delay. She turned to the desk sergeant. I need their body cameras. All footage from today's shift now. The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, there's a process for that. Process changed when this became a federal inquiry. Reyes cut him off. Cameras now. And if anyone's accessed that footage recently, I want to know who and why. Marcus watched as the station's carefully constructed narrative began to crack. Officers who had been so certain of their authority now moved with the jerky energy of people realizing their actions would face scrutiny. Harlan and Whitaker emerged from the break room, their faces pale under the harsh lighting. Eleanor caught Marcus's eye again and held up her phone briefly. She'd been right. The truth needed witnesses, and witnesses needed backup plans. While the system had expected Marcus to disappear into its machinery, he'd instead connected to people who could shine light into its darkest corners. Lieutenant Reyes stood at the booking desk, her presence like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of consequence in every direction. Her voice cut through the tense silence. Where are the body cams? The station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as Lieutenant Reyes stood at the desk, her presence drawing every eye. Chief Harlan Voss burst through the door, his usual polish slightly askew, tie crooked, suit jacket wrinkled from a rushed drive. Lieutenant Reyes, he said, forcing a diplomatic smile, this visit is unexpected. Chief Voss. Reyes's voice remained steady. I need immediate access to all footage and documentation related to today's arrest of Marcus Reed. Body cameras, dispatch recordings, booking video, everything. Voss's smile tightened. There are procedures for requesting. This is no longer a request. Reyes held up her phone. I have direct authorization from the DOJ Civil Rights Division. They're expecting preliminary evidence within the hour. The color drained from Voss's face. Behind him, Officer Harlan shifted nervously, while Officer Whitaker stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Officers Harlan and Whitaker, Reyes called out, turn in your badges and weapons. You're on administrative leave. Pending investigation. This is ridiculous, Harlan protested. We were responding to a legitimate call. Now. Reyes's tone could have frozen water. Or shall we discuss this resistance to a lawful order? The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, who watched from his bench as Harlan's hands shook while surrendering his badge. Whitaker moved mechanically, his face masked in practiced blankness. Chief, Reyes continued, I want access to your evidence storage room, and I need your tech personnel to verify no one has tampered with any recordings. Voss's polished facade cracked further. Lieutenant, surely we can handle this internally. That time passed when federal authorities became involved. Reyes gestured to two officers who had arrived with her. Secure the evidence room. No one enters without my authorization. Eleanor Hargrove remained in the lobby, her phone continuously active. She'd been sending updates to a secure email account, creating a timestamp trail that couldn't be erased. Marcus noticed how the officers gave her a wide berth, as if her documentation was radioactive. Through the station windows, Marcus spotted a news van pulling up. Lila Harrington, known for her uncompromising investigative reporting, stepped out with a cameraman. The night shift sergeant cursed under his breath. Chief, Reyes said, I suggest you prepare a statement. Ms. Harrington appears eager for comments. Voss retreated to his office, already dialing numbers. The station buzzed with urgent whispers and hurried movements. Evidence technicians appeared with laptops and external drives, their faces grim as Reyes supervised the data transfer. D. Curtis Lang arrived, his expensive suit a stark contrast to his thunderous expression. He huddled with Voss, their heated whispers carrying fragments. Can't let this spiral. Federal involvement already. Maintain some control. Lang approached Marcus, his smile as genuine as plastic flowers. Mr. Reed, you're free to go. However, he paused meaningfully. The resisting charge will be processed. Court date coming. Marcus stood, dignity intact despite his exhaustion. You're charging me for resisting when the evidence shows I complied. Evidence can be interpreted many ways, Lang replied smoothly. Perhaps you'll reconsider your approach to this situation before then. The threat was clear. Back down or face the machine's full weight. Marcus straightened his tie, wrinkled but still proper. I look forward to presenting the truth in court. Dawn was breaking as Marcus walked out, Eleanor beside him like a sentinel. Lila Harrington approached, camera light harsh in the growing morning. Mr. Reed, she called out, can you tell us what happened? Marcus paused, aware of eyes watching from the station windows. I was arrested at gunpoint for walking down my street. Officers claimed I was resisting while I complied with every order. The truth is on video. My doorbell camera caught everything, Eleanor added firmly. Multiple copies exist in secure locations. Lila's eyes sparkled with professional interest. And is it true federal authorities are involved? No comment on ongoing investigations, Marcus replied, remembering Agent Vargas's advice. The sky painted itself pink and gold as Marcus finally approached his front porch. Eleanor had insisted on following him home, her presence both comfort and witness. His hands were steady as he reached for his front door, but his heart stumbled when he saw the paper tucked into the frame. The note typed in stark black letters read, "We know where you live." Eleanor plucked it from the door before Marcus could touch it. "Evidence bag in my car," she said calmly. "They're not as smart as they think they are. Printer paper has batch numbers." Lila, the reporter, was already approaching with her camera, documenting the threat. Marcus stood straighter, adjusting his tie one more time. The brown overcoat that had started this day still hung neat despite everything. He was tired, but unbroken, his dignity a weapon they couldn't take. Inside the station, layers of Reyes's voice cut through the shift change. These body cameras better be exactly as they were. If I find 1 second of footage altered, careers will end today. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Marcus's lawn. The suburban quiet felt different now, less peaceful, more watchful. But Marcus had stopped a machine that expected him to disappear. And though it was wounded and angry, he wouldn't back down. Not anymore. Eleanor sealed the threat note in a clear evidence bag, her movements precise. Lila's camera captured it all, ensuring the truth would have many eyes. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another message from Agent Vargas. Evidence preservation team arriving soon. Stay safe. Morning sunlight streamed through Marcus's kitchen window, but brought no warmth. His hands trembled as he lifted his coffee cup, the brown liquid rippling like his unsettled nerves. The morning news played quietly on his small counter radio. The local station already spinning their version of yesterday's events. Just a routine stop, the police spokesman claimed. Officers following standard procedure. Marcus picked up his phone, dreading the call he had to make. After 3 rings, Sharon from HR answered, with professional detachment. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice cool. "We've been expecting your call. Sharon, I need to explain what happened. The company has already been made aware of the situation." She cut in. "Given the circumstances and pending charges, you're being placed on administrative leave effective immediately, without pay, pending investigation." Marcus's throat tightened. "But I haven't been convicted of anything. I was wrongfully. This is standard procedure, Mr. Reed. We'll need you to return any company property. Your building access has been temporarily suspended." The line went dead before he could respond. His spotless service wiped away with one phone call. His mortgage payment loomed. A gentle knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Eleanor Hargrove stood at his back door, arms full of grocery bags, her silver hair neat despite the early hour. "You need to eat," she announced, bustling in without waiting for an invitation. "And we need to plan." She unpacked methodically. Bread, eggs, fruit, coffee, enough for several days. From her ever-present tote bag, she pulled a crisp folder. "I've started our documentation," she said, spreading papers across his table. "Witness names, security camera locations. We need redundancy, copies in multiple places they can't reach." Marcus stared at the growing pile of papers. "They already reached my job." "Expected." Eleanor nodded grimly. "They'll try to isolate you first. Cut off resources, support systems, make you feel alone." She squeezed his shoulder. "But you're not." His doorbell rang. Deacon Victor Lang stood on the front porch, his weathered face creased with concern. Marcus let him in, noticing how Victor's eyes swept the street before entering. "Church council met early," Victor said, settling into a kitchen chair. "We're with you, Marcus, but I need to be straight. This won't be easy. Some folks are already calling you a troublemaker." "Let me guess," Eleanor said sharply. "Barbara Sutton's been talking." Victor nodded. "Her social media post has hundreds of shares. I was just trying to protect our neighborhood," she wrote. He looked suspicious, moving fast, watching houses. Marcus's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. "I was walking to my car in a tie." "Doesn't matter to them," Victor said. "They'll paint whatever picture serves their purpose." Eleanor's phone buzzed. She read the message and straightened. "Sofia Alvarez can meet us. She's taking the case, the civil rights attorney." Victor's eyebrows rose. "That's good. You'll need her experience." Marcus checked his own phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages from concerned friends, and one text from an unknown number. Should have just cooperated. The morning crawled by. Marcus watched more patrol cars than usual cruise his street. Neighbors walked their dogs on the opposite sidewalk, some avoiding eye contact, others staring too long. A local news van parked briefly before Eleanor marched out and firmly suggested they respect private property. Sofia Alvarez arrived, her smart pants, suit, and briefcase radiating competence. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. They'll use procedure as punishment, she said, arranging files on Marcus's table. Court dates that conflict with work, check-ins designed to disrupt your schedule, paperwork that's always somehow incomplete. But the evidence, Marcus started, can vanish, Sophia cut in. Files corrupt, footage gets misplaced. Witnesses suddenly can't remember. Clearly, she fixed Marcus with a steady gaze. This isn't just about two officers anymore. The whole department will protect their narrative. Eleanor produced her own files. I've already backed up everything. Multiple formats, multiple locations. Sophia nodded approvingly. Good. DeLange is ambitious. He'll try to make an example of Marcus, paint him as aggressive, uncooperative, the kind of case that plays well with certain voters. But the White House liaison, Marcus began, bought us time and attention, Sophia agreed. But local courts move on local time. Lang knows that. He'll drag this out, wear you down, make you want to plead just to end it. She opened her laptop, fingers moving swiftly. We need to get ahead of this. Eleanor's footage shows your compliance. We have proof the call was suspicious. There's a pattern here. We just need to force them to face it. Marcus's kitchen had become a war room. Eleanor organized evidence while Victor made calls to church members who'd witnessed the arrest. Sophia drafted motions, her typing punctuated by sharp observations about procedural violations. The arraignment is crucial, Sophia explained. They'll try to set harsh conditions, restricted movement, frequent check-ins, maybe even ankle monitoring, all designed to break your routine, your dignity. She looked up from her screen. I've seen this playbook before. They're betting you'll crack under pressure, accept a plea just to get your life back. Marcus straightened his tie. The same blue one, now a symbol of defiance. They bet wrong. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his kitchen floor. Outside, another patrol car rolled by, slower than necessary. Eleanor documented its plate number without comment. Victor prayed quietly in the corner, his presence a steady anchor. Sophia closed one file, opened another. Let's review our strategy. The court appearance is just the first battle. They're counting on you fighting alone. The courthouse hallway's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Marcus's face as he straightened his blue tie. The same tie from the arrest, now a quiet statement of defiance. Sophia Alvarez stood beside him, briefcase ready, her posture broadcasting calm authority. Remember, she murmured, they want a reaction. Don't give them one. The wooden benches lining the hall filled with mourning defendants, but a clear space remained around Marcus, as if proximity might be contagious. Eleanor Hargrove arrived, notebook and pen already in hand, settling onto a bench with librarian precision. D.A. Curtis Lang strode past, expensive suit cutting through the crowd. He barely glanced at Marcus, but his dismissive smirk said everything. Two uniformed officers flanked the courtroom doors, hands resting too casually on their weapons. Intimidation theater, Sophia whispered. Standard playbook. Inside the courtroom's polished surfaces gleamed under more fluorescent lights. The American flag hung limp in the corner, its promise of justice feeling distant. Marcus took his place beside Sophia, conscious of every eye watching, waiting for him to prove their prejudices right. Docket number, the clerk announced. State versus Marcus Reed, charge of resisting arrest. D.A. Lang rose, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. Your Honor? The defendant displayed aggressive behavior during a routine stop. Officers were forced to respond to his confrontational stance. Objection, Sophia cut in smoothly. Counsel is editorializing without evidence. The judge, a thin man named Harrison with wire-rimmed glasses, nodded slightly. Noted. Continue, Mr. Lang. Lang produced a document with theatrical timing. We have a statement from Chief Voss's office praising officers Harlan and Whitaker for their professional handling of a volatile situation. Marcus's hands tightened beneath the table, but his face remained neutral. The volatile situation had been him walking to his car. Furthermore, Lang continued, given the defendant's hostile attitude. Objection, Sophia interrupted again. Characterization without foundation. Sustained. Judge Harrison sighed. Mr. Lang, stick to facts. But the damage was done. The word hostile hung in the air like smoke. Marcus noticed the court reporter's fingers hesitate over her keys, as if even she felt the weight of the narrative being constructed. The state requests strict release conditions, Lang pressed. Daily check-ins at the police station, travel restricted to work and home. No contact with witnesses. Sophia stood. Your Honor, my client has no prior record. He's a respected professional with deep community ties. These conditions are punitive and unnecessary. Judge Harrison peered over his glasses. Mr. Reed, do you understand that any violation of release conditions will result in immediate detention? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus kept his voice steady, measured, giving them nothing to twist. Very well. The judge shuffled papers. Release conditions said as follows. Check-ins multiple times per week at the police station. Travel restricted to work, home, and essential services within city limits. No contact with officers Harlan or Whitaker or any potential witnesses. Behind Marcus, Eleanor's pen scratched steadily, documenting every word. The conditions were designed to strangle his routine. Check-ins that would disrupt work, travel limits that would complicate basic errands. Additionally, the judge continued, defendant must surrender his passport and maintain current employment. Marcus felt the cruel irony. They'd already forced his job to suspend him. Sophia's hand touched his arm briefly, a silent signal to stay calm. Outside the courtroom, reporters clustered like hungry birds. Lila Harrington stepped forward, her press badge catching the light. Unlike the others, her microphone didn't thrust aggressively. Mr. Reed? She asked quietly. Did you resist? The hallway hushed. Other reporters leaned in, cameras whirring. Marcus met Lila's gaze directly. I survived, he answered, his dignity intact. The whispers started immediately. Court staff watched from doorways. A passing bailiff's hand drifted to his weapon. The message was clear. How dare he survive without apology? Barbara Sutton stood near the elevator, clutching her purse like a shield. Her eyes met Marcus's briefly before skittering away, but not before he caught the satisfaction in them. She'd lit the fuse with her call, and now she was watching the explosion from a safe distance. Your next check-in is coming, the court clerk announced, handing Marcus papers. Any missed check-in will trigger a warrant. Marcus accepted the papers without comment, feeling the system's gears grinding into motion. Eleanor approached, her notebook full of fresh observations. I counted multiple separate cases this morning, all similar patterns, harsh conditions, check-ins, travel restrictions. They've done this before. Sophia nodded grimly. It's how they maintain control. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. The courthouse steps seemed steeper on the way down. More patrol cars than usual circled the block. Marcus spotted Officer Whitaker watching from a parked cruiser across the street, not obviously, but deliberately visible. His phone buzzed, another message from an unknown number. Should have kept your mouth shut. Don't engage, Sophia advised, noting the message. That's what they want. The morning sun felt cold despite the clear sky. Downtown traffic flowed normally around the courthouse, the world continuing as if nothing had changed. But Marcus felt the invisible bars being constructed, check-ins, restrictions, surveillance, the kind of cage built from paperwork instead of steel. Lila Harrington caught up to them at the parking lot. Mr. Reed, I'd like to do a proper interview. Tell your side accurately. We'll consider it, Sophia replied before Marcus could speak. Right now, we're focusing on documentation. Eleanor held up her notebook. Everything's logged, badges, statements. They can't erase what we've preserved. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as people filed in, filling rows of metal folding chairs. The air conditioning struggled against the crowd's collective tension. Marcus sat between Sophia and Eleanor, with Deacon Victor Lang's steady presence behind them. The room smelled of coffee and barely contained hostility. Chief Harlan Voss approached the podium, his badge catching the light. His crisp uniform and practiced smile projected authority without force. A masterclass in controlled messaging. Good evening, neighbors, he began, voice as polished as marble. We're here to discuss recent events that have caused concern in our community. Barbara Sutton sat prominently in the front row, tissues clutched in manicured hands. Her performance of distress drew sympathetic murmurs from nearby supporters. Public safety requires trust, Voss continued. When officers encounter resistance, a cluster of uniformed officers near the wall nodded approvingly. Officer Harlan wasn't present, but his supporters made their presence known with pointed applause at the word resistance. Eleanor's pen moved steadily across her notebook, documenting every calculated word and choreographed reaction. Beside her, Sophia typed quick notes on her phone, building their record of the narrative being constructed. Mrs. Sutton, Voss gestured respectfully. Would you like to share your experience? Barbara stood, dabbing at dry eyes. I was so frightened, she quavered, when I saw him walking through our neighborhood looking at houses. I was walking to my car, Marcus said quietly. But the moderator, a thin man named Peterson, raised his hand for silence. Barbara continued, her voice growing stronger with her audience's support. I did what we're always told. If you see something, say something. The officers were so professional, even when he became difficult. More approving murmurs, more pointed looks at Marcus. Thank you for your courage, Voss said gravely. This is exactly why we need community vigilance. Deacon Victor's hand settled briefly on Marcus's shoulder. Steady. Grounding. The tension in Marcus's jaw eased slightly, but his eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. When the moderator opened the floor for comments, Marcus stood. Peterson's hand shot up immediately. Perhaps, Peterson suggested with manufactured concern, Mr. Reed would prefer to have a private conversation with Chief Voss later. These emotions are still fresh. Silencing truth doesn't serve justice. Sophia's voice cut through the murmurs. She stood beside Marcus, professional and precise. If the facts support your narrative, they can survive public discussion. Lila Harrington's camera tracked the exchange, catching Peterson's discomfort and Voss's carefully neutral expression. Now, Peterson placated. We're trying to heal as a community by excluding half of it. Eleanor's question carried the weight of decades watching similar tactics. The crowd's mood shifted like weather before a storm. Someone in the back, deliberately just hidden enough, shouted a racial slur that echoed off the walls. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply took out his phone and began recording. His movements deliberate and calm. The documentation itself became an act of defiance. Name, badge number, and details, he stated clearly, panning across the uniformed officers who failed to react to the slur. Noted, Voss's polished facade cracked slightly. This wasn't following the script. The target wasn't playing his assigned role of either aggressor or apologist. More voices rose from the crowd. Why are you making trouble? Just apologize. Go back to point of order, Deacon Victor interrupted, his deep voice commanding attention. The bylaws require speakers be recognized and identified, so let's have names with those comments. The shouters fell silent, unwilling to own their words. Barbara Sutton stood again, clutching the back of her chair. I just don't understand why he's making this so difficult. The officers were doing their jobs. Sophia's eyebrow arched. Is it department policy to draw weapons on unarmed citizens walking to their cars? To manufacture resistance charges without cause? Please cite the relevant regulations. Peterson fumbled with his papers. We're not here to debate police procedure. Exactly, Marcus said quietly. You're here to pressure me into accepting injustice. He turned to face the crowd directly. I will not apologize for walking while black in my own neighborhood. I will not apologize for surviving an armed confrontation I didn't create. And I will not apologize for demanding accountability. He walked toward the exit, steps measured and dignified. Eleanor, Sophia, and Deacon Victor moved with him, not as an escape, but as a choice to reject the farce. Lila's camera followed their exit, capturing the stark contrast between Marcus's composure and the angry faces behind him. She caught Voss checking his phone with sudden concern. Clearly, higher authorities were taking notice. The parking lot was dark except for scattered security lights. Marcus's car sat alone near the back, and even from a distance, the spiderweb crack across his windshield was visible. The message was as crude as it was clear. His phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unlisted number. The voice hissed with artificial courage. "We'll make you the example." Sophia immediately documented the threat while Eleanor photographed the windshield damage. Deacon Victor surveyed the empty lot with practiced awareness, noting surveillance camera angles. "They're escalating," Sophia observed, "because dignity scares them more than anger." Marcus touched the cracked glass, his reflection fragmented but unbroken. "They want me to choose between dignity and safety. I choose both." Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds in Sophia's office, casting stripes across stacks of papers and photographs spread across the conference table. The evidence told their story in precise detail. Time-stamped images, written statements, and multiple angles of footage showing the truth they needed to protect. Eleanor Hargrove sat straight-backed in her chair, methodically walking them through her system. Her silver hair caught the light as she gestured to each carefully labeled folder. "I've been a librarian," she explained, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades preserving knowledge. "The first thing you learn is that information isn't safe unless it's redundant." She opened her laptop, revealing a detailed spreadsheet. Every piece of evidence exists in multiple places, digital, physical, all with documented chains of custody. Her mouse clicked through folders, external drives, cloud storage, printed copies and locations, and everything has verifiable details. Sophia leaned forward, studying the doorbell camera footage Eleanor had preserved. The video quality was crystal clear. Marcus's hands raised, palms open, his posture non-threatening. Officer Harlan's aggressive stance filled the frame, his weapon drawn despite no visible threat. "The audio is what sells it," Eleanor said, turning up the volume. Marcus's calm voice came through clearly. "I'm complying, sir," followed immediately by Harlan's manufactured drama. "Stop resisting." "This is exactly what we need," Sophia said, already pulling up motion templates on her computer. The contrast between reality and their narrative couldn't be clearer. She picked up her phone, dialing Lieutenant Carla Reyes's direct line. "Lieutenant Sophia Alvarez. I'm about to file motions with some compelling evidence. I need confirmation that you've secured the department's footage as well." Eleanor continued organizing while Sophia spoke, her movements precise and purposeful. She'd created detailed logs of every witness statement, every threatening note, every instance of intimidation they documented. "Look at this pattern," she said, spreading out a timeline. "The escalation isn't random. Every time we present evidence, they respond with pressure. That's consciousness of guilt." Lila Harrington arrived just before noon, cameraman in tow. She reviewed the footage carefully, asking pointed questions about verification and sources. Her professionalism showed in every detail. "This isn't about sensation," Lila said, making notes. "This is about showing people exactly what happened without commentary. The facts speak for themselves." Her segment aired that afternoon. The station ran it straight. No dramatic music, no emotional manipulation, just clear footage of a man being targeted, complete with verification and expert analysis of proper police procedure versus what actually occurred. The impact was immediate. Phones started ringing. Emails poured in. Older residents especially recognized the tactics they were seeing, the kind of institutional pressure they'd watched silence truth before. "My mother called," Lila reported later. "She's lived here. She said she always suspected things like this happened, but now she has proof. She's angry, and she's not alone." Deacon Victor arrived, his calm presence filling the room. "We're gathering," he said. "Not to protest, not to shout, just to stand together and show Marcus he's not alone." He pulled out his own notebook. "I've got church members who've documented similar incidents over the years. They're ready to speak up now that someone's broken the silence." Marcus sat quietly through most of the day, watching truth take solid form in files and footage. The weight that had pressed on his shoulders since the arrest seemed to lift slightly with each new layer of verification. "This is really happening," he said softly. "They can't just make it disappear." "No, they can't," Sophia agreed, printing another copy of the motion. "The hearing could end this charge. The evidence is too clear, too well documented." Eleanor patted his hand. That's why I started recording the moment I saw them approach you, because truth needs teeth to bite through lies. The community gathering that evening was exactly as Deacon Victor had planned, dignified, determined, and impossible to dismiss as angry rabble. Gray-haired grandmothers stood beside young professionals. Children held small signs saying simply, "Truth matters." They didn't march. They didn't chant. They simply stood together in the church parking lot, a quiet testament to solidarity that made the news alongside Lila's footage. "This is what they fear most," Sophia observed, watching the coverage. Not violence, not shouting, just calm, documented truth backed by community witness. Back in her office, the day's victory felt tangible as she prepared to secure the evidence for the night. The footage that would end this case sat ready. She copied it to the secure drive, watching the progress bar move steadily across her screen. At near completion, everything froze. The screen flickered once and went completely black. Eleanor's redundancy system would prove prophetic sooner than anyone expected. The simple progress bar became a stark reminder. Truth might have teeth, but corruption had claws that reached into digital darkness. Sophia's fingers flew across the keyboard, but nothing responded. The black screen mocked her efforts, hiding whatever damage had been done behind its dark wall. Marcus stood behind her chair, his reflection ghostly in the dead monitor. "No, no, no," Sophia muttered, forcing herself to slow down and think systematically. She reached for her phone, already dialing IT support. "This isn't a crash. This isn't a This is targeted." Eleanor pulled out her own laptop, checking their backup locations. Her face tightened. "The shared drive is showing access errors. Someone's been inside the system." Sophia switched to her backup computer, logging into their secure server. Red flags popped up everywhere. Altered timestamps, missing files, corrupted data. The neat package they'd prepared for court had been gutted with surgical precision. "They knew exactly what to hit," Sophia said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This wasn't random. They went straight for the authenticated copies we needed for the hearing." Marcus sank into a chair, his shoulders heavy. "How? The system was supposed to be secure." "Systems are only as secure as the people who control them," Eleanor replied, still typing. Her screen showed multiple folders, each labeled with her precise organizational system. "But they don't know librarians. We believe in redundancy." She opened her email, revealing dozens of messages sent to herself, each containing pieces of evidence with verified details. "Every time I updated our files, I sent encrypted copies through different channels. They can't erase what they can't find." Sophia was already documenting the attack, taking screenshots of access logs and error messages. "This proves consciousness of guilt. They're destroying evidence. That's a separate crime." A sharp knock at the office door made them all jump. Lila Harrington stood in the doorway, her face grim. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. "They're making their move." The phone showed a police report filed claiming Marcus had violated his release conditions by threatening a witness. The details were vague but official-looking, wrapped in just enough procedural language to seem legitimate. "This is impossible," Marcus said, reading the report. "I haven't left my house except for approved meetings. I haven't spoken to anyone. They haven't cleared." "Truth doesn't matter," Sophia said, already reaching for her coat. "They just needed a paper trail. We need to get you." Red and blue lights flashed through the office windows, cutting her off. Multiple patrol cars pulled up outside, their arrival choreographed for maximum impact. Through the glass, they could see Officer Whitaker standing back, watching from his personal vehicle, stripped of his badge, but still pulling strings. "Remember," Sophia said quickly, gripping Marcus's arm, "say nothing, not one word. I'll be right behind you." The officers entered with practiced efficiency, hands on weapons, though they knew Marcus posed no threat. They recited the violation claims in bored voices, as if this was just routine paperwork instead of calculated destruction. Marcus stood perfectly still as they cuffed him, his face a mask of dignity that made their show of force look excessive. Eleanor filmed everything openly, her phone steady despite her anger. Lila's cameraman arrived just in time to catch Marcus being let out. Exactly the image the department wanted to spread. At the station, D.A. Curtis Lang was waiting, his suit crisp. Mr. Reed seems unable to follow simple instructions, he announced to the assembled press. This pattern of unstable, non-compliant behavior proves our original concerns were justified. They placed Marcus in the same cell as before, the familiar humiliation settling over him like a weighted blanket. Hours passed in fluorescent-lit silence. Around him, the machine hummed, papers shuffled, phones rang, justice delayed with every minute. Finally, alone in his cell, Marcus's composure cracked. His hands shook as he pressed them against his face, muffling a sound that was part sob, part fury. Every rule he'd followed, every system he'd trusted, had been turned against him. But in that moment of breaking, something else crystallized. A steel-hard resolve that dried his tears and straightened his spine. They wanted him to disappear into their system, to become another statistic of submission. Instead, he would become their nightmare, a witness who refused to be silenced. The first gray light of dawn was seeping through the high window when Sophia appeared at his cell. Her voice was barely a whisper through the glass, but her words carried the weight of a hammer. "We go federal today." Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what that meant. No more playing nice with local power, no more trusting corrupt systems to police themselves. They would push this up to where badges couldn't reach and connections couldn't save. Behind Sophia, Eleanor stood with her ever-present notebook, already documenting this latest abuse of power. She'd stayed organizing evidence of the cyber attack alongside proof of this retaliatory arrest. Lila waited in the lobby, her camera ready to show the world what happened to people who dared to demand accountability. The morning sun climbed higher, casting bars of light across Marcus's cell floor. Each stripe looked like a ladder rung leading up and out of the local machine's reach. They thought this cell would break him. Instead, it had become the launching pad for something much bigger than a simple resisting arrest charge. They wanted him to resist. Now he would resist their way, with evidence, with witnesses, with federal oversight that couldn't be deleted or detained. The time for quiet dignity was over. This was war fought with paperwork and truth, and they'd just given him more ammunition. The jail's attorney meeting room felt different that morning, sterile and unwelcoming as always, but now charged with anticipation. Sophia Alvarez set up her laptop on the scratched table while Marcus sat beside her, his brown overcoat wrinkled from the night in custody. The video call window opened, revealing Special Agent Lena Vargas's composed face. "Agent Vargas," Sophia began, her voice steady. "Thank you for making time on short notice." Lena Vargas nodded once, her expression neutral but alert. "Walk me through the timeline, Ms. Alvarez." Sophia shared her screen, displaying a folder structure riddled with error messages and access warnings. Our secure drive containing authenticated evidence was compromised. The attack was precise, targeting only files related to the hearing. She pulled up log files showing multiple unauthorized access attempts. The details here were altered to create confusion about when files were originally created and modified. This wasn't a random hack. It required internal knowledge of both our system and the specific evidence we planned to present. Marcus watched as Sophia methodically laid out the digital breadcrumbs, access logs, error reports. The technical details painted a clear picture of deliberate sabotage. "And the retaliatory arrest?" Lena Vargas asked, her eyes scanning something off-screen. "Filed soon after," Sophia replied, pulling up the police report. "The timing isn't subtle. They needed to discredit Mr. Reed before we could expose the evidence tampering." Lieutenant Carla Reyes joined the video call, her appearance causing a slight shift in Lena Vargas's posture, two professionals recognizing each other's authority. "Internal Affairs has noted several irregularities," Reyes stated, her tone carefully neutral. "Access logs to our evidence servers show similar anomalies. When I attempted to investigate, I encountered significant resistance from within the department." "Resistance? How?" Lena Vargas asked. "Delayed responses. Missing documentation. Convenient system maintenance windows." Reyes's mouth tightened. "The walls here are thick, Agent Vargas, and they're getting thicker." Sophia opened another folder, this one containing screenshots of threatening messages. They're not just tampering with evidence. They're actively intimidating witnesses and creating a climate of fear. She played a voicemail. We'll make you the example. The threat hung in the air, made worse by its casual delivery. Lena Vargas leaned forward slightly, her first visible reaction. Who else has copies of these threats? Multiple secure locations, Sophia answered. Eleanor Hargrove, our key witness, implemented a comprehensive backup system. She anticipated they might try to erase the truth. Smart woman, Lena Vargas commented. She typed something, then looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Reed, have you been informed of your rights regarding federal witness protection? Marcus straightened. Yes, ma'am, but I'm not hiding. This is my home, my community. Lena Vargas nodded, respecting his choice without arguing. Then, let's discuss immediate steps. First, preservation orders for all relevant servers and systems. Any deletion or modification attempts after service will constitute federal obstruction. She outlined the process with surgical precision, server imaging, chain of custody requirements, seizure warrants if necessary. The local department's autonomy was about to shrink considerably. Lieutenant Reyes, Lena Vargas continued, my team will need unrestricted access to your internal affairs files regarding Officers Harlan and Whitaker. You'll have them, Reyes replied, already making notes. The meeting continued with exact procedures. Marcus noticed how different this felt from local promises. No vague reassurances, just clear actions with federal weight behind them. Procedural pressure forced Marcus's release. He walked out of the jail into harsh sunlight. Sophia beside him, Eleanor Hargrove waiting with a stack of printed logs held like scholarly evidence. Lila Harrington approached with her camera but kept a respectful distance. Mr. Reed, would you like to make a statement? Marcus straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and spoke with quiet authority. The truth doesn't vanish just because someone tries to delete it. Every threat, every false charge, every attempt to hide evidence, it all proves what they're afraid of. Accountability. Eleanor stepped forward, holding up her meticulous records. The details don't lie, she said firmly, and librarians don't lose things. A crowd had gathered, tension building, but Deacon Victor Lang's presence helped maintain calm. He'd positioned church members strategically, creating a buffer of dignity and support. Their silent solidarity spoke volumes about community strength. Lila's cameraman captured it all. Marcus's composed determination. Eleanor's documented proof. The peaceful crowd standing witness. The story was shifting from a local arrest to something bigger. Systematic abuse of power meeting systematic exposure. The afternoon light slanted across the courthouse steps as Sophia checked her phone. Agent Vargas's team is mobilizing, she said quietly. The preservation orders are being prepared. Around them, the town felt different. The machine that had seemed so powerful was discovering its limitations. Federal jurisdiction cast long shadows, and those shadows were about to fall heavily on local badges that thought themselves untouchable. As evening approached, unmarked federal vehicles began appearing near the police department. They parked with quiet efficiency, engines off, lights dark. Their presence was both a promise and a warning. Justice might move slowly, but it moved with crushing weight once engaged. Inside the department, phones started ringing as news of federal involvement spread. The machine was about to learn that some things couldn't be buried with paperwork or intimidation. Sometimes the truth had teeth, and those teeth came with federal badges. The pre-dawn darkness shrouded the police department in shadows as unmarked federal vehicles pulled into the parking lot. Special Agent Lena Vargas stepped out first, her dark suit crisp. Other agents followed, carrying evidence collection equipment and document boxes. Lieutenant Carla Reyes waited by the front entrance, her face tight with professional tension. Agent Vargas, everything's ready. Thank you, Lieutenant. Lena held up a thick stack of warrants. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as they entered. Night shift officers stared, suddenly very interested in their paperwork. Lena's team moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into predetermined groups. Chief Harlan Voss burst out of his office, his usual polish cracking around the edges. This is completely unnecessary. We've been fully cooperative, Chief Voss. Lena's voice cut through his bluster like a blade. She handed him the first warrant. This authorizes immediate seizure of all body camera footage, including backup archives and metadata logs. The second covers dispatch recordings. The third, she continued dealing documents like cards, encompasses server access records, internal affairs files, and all communications related to Marcus Reed's arrest. Voss drew himself up. Now wait just a minute. Any interference constitutes obstruction of a federal investigation. Lena's calm certainty made his authority seem small and local. Your IT personnel will provide immediate access or will remove the servers entirely. 2 agents were already heading toward the evidence room. Another team made their way to records. Voss watched his domain being methodically invaded by federal badges that outranked his protests. Officer Derek Harlan arrived, freezing when he saw the activity. His face drained of color as Lena approached. Officer Harlan, your body camera footage from the Reed arrest shows several inconsistencies with your written statement. She held up a tablet displaying parallel details. Would you care to explain why you reported giving clear verbal warnings when the audio proves otherwise? Harlan's swagger evaporated. There must be some mistake and the footage details are encrypted and authenticated. Lena continued. They can't be altered without leaving digital traces. Would you like to revise your statement now? In a corner office, 2 agents were imaging Officer Vance Whitaker's phone. Text messages scrolled across their screens, conversations that treated resisting like a predetermined conclusion rather than an observed fact. Look at this, one agent said, highlighting a message exchanged before the arrest. They were already discussing how to write it up. Lena examined the screen. The texts painted a clear picture of officers planning narrative instead of responding to reality. She made notes while her team continued extracting data. Outside the building, D.A. Curtis Lang held an impromptu press conference, his usual commanding tone slipping into defensive territory. This is nothing but political theater, he declared to the gathered reporters, a waste of federal resources to appease activists. Lila Harrington cut in. Mr. Lang, how do you respond to the evidence of manipulation, the documented attempts to alter records? Those allegations are completely. I have the server logs right here. Lila held up her tablet, the access times, the deletion attempts, the modified metadata. Numbers don't have politics, sir. Across town, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug gone cold. Sophia had been clear. Stay home. Stay calm. Let the system work for once. Eleanor Hargrove's car was parked across the street, her presence both comforting and strategic. Her security cameras recorded every vehicle that passed, every face that looked too long at Marcus's house. Another patrol car. Eleanor texted, I've got the plate numbers. Back at the station, Lena's team worked through the evidence room methodically. They found gaps in the body cam archives. Conveniently timed deletions that left digital fingerprints. The dispatch recording showed selective preservation with key moments during Marcus's arrest mysteriously absent. Chief Voss? Lena called. Could you explain why these specific periods are missing? Voss's polish had completely cracked. System maintenance, regular cleanup. Lena made another note. That's an interesting choice. The morning sun climbed higher as federal agents carried sealed evidence boxes to their vehicles. Each container held another piece of the truth. Emails, text messages, altered reports, and digital traces of obstruction. Inside the department, phones kept ringing. Officers whispered in corners. The machine that had seemed so solid was being dismantled by people who couldn't be intimidated or deflected. Lila Harrington stood outside reporting live. Federal agents are executing multiple warrants following evidence of tampering and obstruction. This stems from the arrest of Marcus Reed, who was charged with resisting arrest despite video evidence showing full compliance. His call to a White House liaison triggered an investigation that has revealed what appears to be systematic manipulation of evidence. She turned to face another camera angle. The timeline is crucial here. Mr. Reed was arrested at gunpoint, charged with resisting, and when evidence supporting his innocence emerged, records began disappearing. The federal response was swift and coordinated. Near midday, Lena Vargas emerged from the building carrying the final evidence box. She paused briefly, her face betraying no emotion as cameras turned toward her. "Agent Vargas," Lila called out. "What happens next?" Lena placed the box carefully in her vehicle, her voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. "The evidence suggests multiple instances of obstruction. That's now part of our investigation." She closed the car door with a solid thunk that seemed to echo across the parking lot. The machine had lost its grip on the truth, one sealed box at a time. The morning sun streamed through tall courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the packed gallery. Every wooden bench creaked with spectators, their whispers creating a tense undercurrent. Marcus Reed sat beside Sofia Alvarez at the defense table, his brown overcoat draped carefully over the back of his chair, blue tie perfectly straight. Thick binders sat before Sofia, each one labeled with meticulous precision. Eleanor Hargrove's documentation system made legal. Behind them, Eleanor herself perched in the front row, her silver hair gleaming, her expression fixed and focused, like a librarian watching someone handle a rare book incorrectly. D.A. Curtis Lang swept in with his usual commanding presence, though his confidence seemed more performance than substance today. He arranged his materials with practiced flourish, barely glancing at the defense table. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. Judge Margaret Howard entered, her robe settling around her as she took her seat. Her eyes swept the courtroom, lingering briefly on the unusual number of federal agents present. "Case number," the clerk announced. "Hearing on defense motion to dismiss." Lang rose smoothly. "Your Honor, the state maintains these charges are properly filed and supported by." "If I may, Your Honor." Sophia's voice carried clear authority. As she stood, she opened the first binder. "We have evidence that directly contradicts not just the charge, but the integrity of the prosecution itself." The judge leaned forward. "Proceed, Ms. Alvarez." Sophia held up a USB drive in a sealed evidence bag. "This contains Ms. Eleanor Hargrove's original doorbell camera footage showing Mr. Reed's full compliance during the arrest. The details are authenticated." She placed it on the evidence table. "And this," she lifted another sealed bag, "contains the department's attempted deletions of their own body camera footage recovered by federal forensics." Chief Harlan Voss shifted uncomfortably in his seat near the front. His polished facade couldn't quite hide his clenched jaw. "Furthermore," Sophia continued, opening the second binder, "we have internal affairs documentation showing systematic attempts to alter evidence after preservation orders were issued. Lieutenant Carla Reyes's sworn statement details multiple instances of tampering." Lang's face tightened. "Your Honor, these allegations are completely—" "Not allegations, Mr. Lang." Sophia's tone could have chilled Summer. "Federal Agent Lena Vargas's preliminary findings." She slid a document toward the bench. "Note the details of deletion attempts compared to when the White House liaison made initial contact." Lila Harrington's pen moved rapidly across her notepad in the press section. Her camera operator focused on Lang's increasingly rigid posture. Judge Howard examined the documents, her expression darkening. "Mr. Lang, are you telling me your office was unaware of this evidence tampering?" "Your Honor, we maintain that any technical issues were purely technical issues." Sophia opened the third binder. It shows text messages between officers. Harlan and Whitaker discussing how to write up the resisting charge before they ever encountered Mr. Reed. It contains their deleted drafts showing how they constructed the narrative backward. The gallery's whispers grew louder. Barbara Sutton, who had been sitting proudly near the front, began inching toward the door. "And here," Sophia lifted another document, "is proof that dispatch recordings were selectively deleted after federal preservation orders. The gaps align perfectly with moments that would have exposed the false narrative." Judge Howard's patience visibly evaporated. "Mr. Lang, does the state wish to explain these discrepancies?" Lang stood, but his usual commanding presence seemed hollow. "Your Honor, while there may be some procedural irregularities," the judge's voice could have etched steel. "Ms. Alvarez has presented evidence of systematic tampering, false reporting, and obstruction of a federal investigation. This isn't irregular, Mr. Lang. This is misconduct. The courtroom fell silent. Marcus sat perfectly still, his dignity a quiet rebuke to everyone who had tried to break it. Your Honor, Sophia stood again. Given the demonstrated pattern of evidence manipulation and false charging, we move for dismissal with prejudice. The state has proven it cannot be trusted to handle this case with integrity. Judge Howard studied the documents again, her expression severe. Several long moments passed before she looked up. This court has seen many disturbing things, she began. But the systematic attempt to destroy an innocent man's life through false charges, evidence tampering, and orchestrated harassment reaches a new level. She fixed Lang with a hard stare. The motion to dismiss is granted with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering a full inquiry into misconduct related to this case. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Chief Voss's face had gone pale. Barbara Sutton slipped out the back door. Mr. Reed. Judge Howard's voice softened slightly. This court owes you an apology. You were subjected to a gross abuse of power and then victimized again by attempts to cover it up. She gathered her papers. This case is dismissed. Court is adjourned. The bang of the gavel seemed to echo. Marcus stood slowly, his composure unbroken. Eleanor Hargrove beamed from the gallery, her meticulous documentation vindicated. Lila Harrington was already typing rapidly on her phone, breaking the news. Sophia gathered their materials with careful precision. They walked out together, past Lang's rigid back, past Chief Voss's crumbling authority, past all the power that had tried to grind Marcus down. The courthouse steps gleamed in the late morning sun. Marcus took his first deep breath as a truly free man, feeling the warmth on his face. Now comes the consequences part, Sophia said beside him. The afternoon sun beat down on the City Hall steps as cameras and microphones clustered around the makeshift podium. The media presence was unprecedented for their small town. Local stations mixed with regional affiliates, all drawn by the story of power finally facing consequences. Lieutenant Carla Reyes approached the microphones, her internal affairs badge catching the light. Her usual stern expression carried extra weight today. Behind her, Special Agent Lena Vargas stood quietly observant, her federal authority adding gravity to every word about to be spoken. Good afternoon, Reyes began, her voice clear and uncompromising. Following a thorough internal investigation, we have identified multiple serious policy violations within our department. She lifted a document. These include false reporting, evidence tampering, and abuse of authority. The cameras clicked rapidly. Lila Harrington stood front row center, her notebook ready, determined to capture every detail accurately. Officers Derek Harlan and Vance Whitaker have been terminated effective immediately, Reyes continued. We are initiating decertification proceedings through the state board. This is not a resignation or transfer. This is a termination for cause. Marcus stood to the side with Sophia Alvarez, watching his attackers' careers crumble in the sunlight. Eleanor Hargrove smiled tightly beside him, her meticulous documentation having helped build this moment. Deacon Victor Lang placed a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder. Additionally, Reyes's voice cut through the murmurs. We have referred our findings to federal authorities for review of potential civil rights violations. Special Agent Vargas stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. The FBI's Civil Rights Division has opened a formal investigation into both the initial incident and subsequent attempts to obstruct justice through evidence tampering. From the crowd, someone called out, "What about Chief Voss?" As if on cue, Chief Harlan Voss emerged from City Hall, his uniform pristine, but his authority visibly diminished. He approached the podium with rehearsed dignity that fooled no one. After careful consideration, he began, his politician's voice strained. I believe it's in the department's best interest that I step down, effective immediately. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Whispers, scattered applause, and the rapid fire of camera shutters capturing his fall. Lila Harrington's pen moved swiftly, recording the careful language of a man trying to control his own disgrace. Chief, Lila called out. Are you resigning because of the federal investigation? Voss's polished smile cracked slightly. I'm choosing to put the department first. Are you anticipating criminal charges? Another reporter interrupted. Before Voss could respond, Special Agent Vargas spoke again. The investigation will follow the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of rank or position. The former chief retreated, his attempt at dignity overshadowed by the reality of his failure. Marcus watched him go, remembering how Voss had dismissed his complaints with such casual authority. D. Curtis Lang was notably absent, but his presence lingered in the announcement that followed. Lieutenant Reyes held up another document. The State Bar Association has received a formal ethics complaint regarding the handling of this case, she stated. The complaint details multiple instances of prosecutorial misconduct, including pursuing charges despite clear evidence of innocence. From the crowd, Barbara Sutton tried to slip away unnoticed, but Eleanor's clear voice stopped her. Mrs. Sutton, would you like to explain your role in this incident? The false complainant hurried away, no longer interested in the attention she'd once craved. Several older residents who had witnessed the original arrest nodded grimly, their silence finally breaking. Sophia Alvarez stepped forward to address questions about civil proceedings. Mr. Reed's rights were violated systematically and deliberately. We will ensure full accountability through every available legal channel. The questions flew rapid fire. Will there be a civil suit? What about the deleted evidence? Are other cases being reviewed? Sophia handled each with precise clarity, never letting emotion overshadow facts. Marcus stood beside her, his dignity intact, his brown overcoat and blue tie a reminder of the ordinary day that power had tried to destroy. Deacon Victor Lang spoke quietly to the community members gathering around them. This isn't about revenge, he reminded them. This is about making sure it doesn't happen again. Lila Harrington's live coverage captured every detail. Former officers Harlan and Whitaker have been fired and face decertification, meaning they can never serve as law enforcement officers again. Chief Voss has resigned under pressure from mounting evidence of departmental misconduct. The DA's office faces serious ethics scrutiny. This isn't just about one incident. This is about systematic abuse, finally facing consequences. The afternoon sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the city hall steps. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped aside to answer it, listening intently as his employer spoke. Mr. Reed, we've reviewed the situation. We'd like you to return to work immediately. Your position is secure and we'll process the back pay for your forced leave as soon as possible. Marcus thanked them quietly, his voice steady. When he rejoined the group, Eleanor was the first to notice his expression. Good news? She asked. Job's back, he said simply. With back pay. Sophia nodded in satisfaction. One more piece of justice. The crowd began to disperse as the press conference wound down. Lieutenant Reyes and Agent Vargas gathered their documents, their work far from over, but the public message delivered. The consequences had landed, visible and undeniable, in the same public space where power had once assumed it was untouchable. Marcus straightened his tie, the simple gesture carrying the weight of restored dignity. The system had tried to break him with guns, badges, and false charges. Instead, truth had broken the system's presumption of immunity. Morning sunlight painted long shadows across the suburban street where Marcus Reed's ordeal had begun. He walked the same path, wearing the same brown overcoat and blue tie, but everything else had changed. The silence that greeted him now wasn't the false peace of suppression. It was the quiet of truth, finally heard. Eleanor Hargrove walked beside him, her librarian's attention to detail having proved as powerful as any weapon. She carried a folder of documents, each page a brick in the wall of accountability they'd built. She moved with the satisfaction of someone who'd seen justice served not through shouting, but through relentless documentation. Look at these gardens, Eleanor remarked, gesturing to the neat flower beds. Everyone so concerned with keeping up appearances, but nobody wanted to speak up when it mattered. Marcus nodded, noticing how neighbors peeked through curtains as they passed. Some waved hesitantly, others quickly disappeared. The street had become a stage where power had tried to perform dominance and failed. Deacon Victor Lang walked a few paces behind them, his presence both protective and dignified. He'd helped organize community support without turning Marcus's fight into a spectacle. Now he carried himself with the quiet pride of someone who'd chosen the right side of history. The church board voted unanimously, Victor said, breaking the morning quiet. We're offering space for the legal aid meetings, no charge. They approached the community room where Sofia Alvarez waited, her briefcase bulging with the paperwork of victory. She'd already set up inside, chairs arranged in a circle, not rows, because this wasn't a performance. This was about building something lasting. Lila Harrington arrived with her camera operator setting up discreetly in the corner. She'd earned their trust by refusing to sensationalize the story, focusing instead on the cold facts that had brought down the powerful. More people filtered in than expected. Older residents who'd stayed quiet, young parents worried about their children's future encounters with authority, even a few retired officers who'd grown disgusted with the department's behavior. Marcus stood at the front, his posture straight but not stiff. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying the same calm dignity that had frustrated Officer Harlan's attempts to provoke him. "We're here to announce something concrete." Sophia stepped forward, laying out the framework they'd developed. "We're establishing the Community Legal Aid Fund," she explained. "It's already received initial funding and commitments from multiple law firms. This isn't just about having lawyers. It's about having evidence preservation protocols, civilian oversight training, and rapid response support." Eleanor added her part. "We've developed a documentation system that any resident can use. Simple, clear steps for preserving evidence and establishing timelines, the kind of thing that makes it harder for truth to disappear." Through the window, Barbara Sutton stood across the street, partially hidden behind a tree. She watched the gathering, her face a complex mix of emotions as she confronted the consequences of her false report. The power she'd thought she was wielding had backfired, exposing ugly truths about the system she'd tried to weaponize. Lila's camera rolled as Marcus explained the practical impact. The dismissal with prejudice means they can't try these charges again. The officer's firing and decertification means they can't just move to another department. The chief's resignation and the DA's ethics complaint show that enablers face consequences too. He paused, making eye contact with various community members. "But that's just punishment. We're here to build protection. The federal investigation is ongoing, and we've established channels to make sure evidence reaches the right authorities." Sophia outlined specific protections. "We've secured commitments for civilian oversight boards with actual power. Body camera footage will have independent review. Complaint processes will have transparency requirements." The meeting continued with practical details, funding structures, reporting protocols, training schedules. This wasn't a victory rally. It was the serious work of building lasting change. "I wasn't resisting," Marcus stated firmly, his words carrying the weight of lived truth. "I was surviving. Now we're building protection so the next person doesn't stand alone." Heads nodded throughout the room. His words resonated with everyone who'd ever swallowed injustice, thinking silence meant safety. As the meeting wound down, people lingered to share their own stories. An elderly man described a traffic stop gone wrong. A young mother worried about her teenage son. Each story reinforced why they needed systematic change, not just individual justice. Outside, Barbara Sutton had disappeared, but her impact remained. A cautionary tale about how quickly being concerned could become conscious cruelty. The afternoon sun was setting as Marcus finally headed home, his street now feeling different, not perfect, not completely safe, but changed. Neighbors who'd hidden behind curtains now stepped onto porches to wave. The power dynamic had shifted. He climbed his front steps, keys jingling in his hand. The same porch where he'd stepped out into what he thought was an ordinary morning. Now he understood. No morning was ordinary when you lived under systems that needed breaking. Inside his house, Marcus moved through his evening routine with deliberate calm. He hung his overcoat carefully, smoothing the brown fabric that had become symbolic of his dignity under pressure. His fingers worked the knot of his blue tie, the same one he'd worn when they'd tried to break him. Standing before his hallway mirror, Marcus slipped the tie from his collar and hung it neatly, a simple action that carried the weight of victory earned, not granted. Each crease and fold represented a choice to stand firm, to document truth, to build protection rather than seek revenge. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.